in this presentation, we're going to go over a technical review. We're going to review the protocol that we just talked about on the last set of slides, and then we're going to talk about what's going to be required for making this whole thing work from a DNS perspective. So again, before anything, this TA form is probably going to be the most complex, or at least cause the most problems throughout this entire process. It must be filled out completely. The first form must be notarized. If every subsequent TA doesn't need to be notarized, you can just have the primary vouch for them. But the first TA of every organization must be notarized and completely filled out. Again, should be completely filled out with a driver's license. Social Security number is not required, but if you can provide it, it'll help. Otherwise, we may come back to you requesting a second form of photo ID that has, a unique number. It could be a office ID tag, could be a passport, could be a, federal, military license, anything along those lines. So you got your TA form. We need to identify the domain name that you're going to want to use, and then ultimately we need to understand the workflows and the requirements that we're going to actually be delivering on. So again, trusted agent, the person who's going to vouch for the identities, fill it out completely, return it, and that'll just help in the overall process. When we talk about a domain name, this is where it's really going to depend on the situation that we're talking about. So if I was a hospital system, I could have direct.myhospital.com, and my users would be, Dr.1 at direct.myhospital.com. And that could be an organizational certificate, and that will cover everybody in my entire hospital. I may have use cases where I want to go ahead and give out addresses to people in my organization, and I want to give out addresses to people outside my organization. So that could actually be two domains. That could be internal.myhospital.com and then external.myhospital.com. The point there is that you have address certificates on the external, and you have an organizational certificate covering everybody on the internal. So this slide here kind of tries and gives a little bit of a breakdown in terms of, what are the best ways to approach domain names, because domain names are going to directly kind of correlate to the certificates being used. That's why it's important to think about both of them in the same thought process, because one will directly impact another. Another set of use cases would be where I am a software vendor, and I want to go and give direct addresses to my customers, my practices. Well, what you could do is that you would have something like this case 1, where myself, I am direct.company.com, and for my practices, I am practice.direct.company.com. And basically that practice, whether they're 5 people or they're 500 people, can have direct addresses. So the domain and how certificates are, correlating to domains, those are two pieces that do need to be looked at and considered at the same time. So we can talk about that further. It is important to note, though, that there are certain internet providers like Network Solutions, like One-and-One Internet, where they do not allow you to make specific changes in DNS that are required in order to utilize your existing domain with direct. And really what that means is that you don't have the ability to say direct.company.com should be pointed to the DataMotion servers. If you do not have that capability, then the only options for that customer would be to either A, change who their DNS provider is, which is a not common thing to do and probably would be not the option pursued in many use cases. Or the second option is where the customer can go and register a brand new domain, say companydirect.com, use it exclusively for direct messaging, and have that domain pointed right directly to the DataMotion servers, avoiding any kind of DNS changes or anything along those lines. So that is a technical kind of stipulation that needs to be looked at in some of this process, and usually we uncover that during any kind of, any kind of pre-sales calls or anything along those lines. When it comes to domain validation, so part of the process is that, because we're generating certificates, DigiCert and DataMotion are basically going to need to verify that you as the customer actually own that domain that you want to use. So an email is sent to the people listed in the Whois record. This is the people that are listed as the technical or administrative contact when you registered or purchased your domain name. Sometimes it's your IT department. Sometimes it's people that haven't been working at that organization for 10 years. We usually uncover that during the process. It's very simple for you to find out on your own. You can just go to whois.com, whois.com, type in your domain name, and it'll tell you who the administrative or technical contacts are. Just to follow up on that, you guys would get that email, you'd open that email, you'd acknowledge it, and basically say, yes, I allowed the domain to have certificates generated, and that'll release it so that way the certificates will be released to us. If the domain is not validated, we will not get the certificate. So this is a fairly important step that, again, DataMotion does not have direct control over. When we talk about direct addresses, again, direct addresses are very similar to that of email addresses. It's very easy to confuse them. That's why the best practice should always be, make it clear and easy to understand. Have the word direct in it, just so that way you can differentiate versus something else. It's just common sense in some regards. Workflow may dictate what these look like. You have flexibility over it. But again, everything will be based upon the kinds of certificates that you have as well as the domains that you use. Group mailboxes are okay. However, all of the users must be part of the same legal entity in order to use a group mailbox. At this point in time, the only way to have multiple people access a group mailbox is by sharing a common username and password. At a later date, there will be true group mailbox sharing with individual usernames and passwords. But because of this, that's why group mailboxes should only be used within a particular company or organization. Just to touch on some integration methods or give an example of a very commonly seen integration method, which is known as XDR. It's important to note that these XDR systems are legacy. These are guys that have been in the business for 15, 20, 25 years and had put together this XDR protocol that allows them to send messages, between themselves, and that was 10 years ago. So what happens is that XDR-enabled systems do not send direct. They need a HISP to do it for them. So basically, when you have an XDR, you define who I'm getting the messages from, where I'm sending messages to, and then DataMotion will sit in the middle and talk direct amongst other parties. So in the below use case that we see here, HISP-C is a regular, everyday, direct user, and DataMotion has a customer that is an EHR system using XDR. So in this workflow, we can see that from the left to the right, somebody's sending a message via XDR, DataMotion is processing it, we are using direct to send it to its recipient, and because of the already established relationships of trust bundles, direct messaging, etc., that is how HISP-C is able to then open up that message and deliver it to where it needs to go. So this is just an example of where DataMotion is doing processing for you and actually doing a conversion from a legacy system into the direct protocol. When we talk about DNS, we covered it a little bit in the prior slides about domain. Again, this is a commonly done thing by a technical team or your outsourced IT team. The reason that this has to be done is because DataMotion must reply to direct mail requests. The reason is because DataMotion runs a direct-enabled DNS server. DataMotion runs a direct-enabled mail server, so therefore DataMotion must be the ones to respond to internet requests to send direct messages. Again, just to recap, If your current DNS provider does not support the use of a name server record, commonly network solutions and one-in-one internet, then you would either need to change DNS providers or register a new domain for use explicitly with direct. At this point, we like to just clarify some of the issues about certificates, risk associated with certificates. So first and foremost is that certificates can only be requested by TAs, meaning not anybody can just make a certificate. A TA has to request the certificates to be made. Certificates are used to confirm the identity of users on the system. Every user or organization has a unique certificate, and it is bound to them. Last but not least, and this is a fairly important one, is that these certificates, while they seem the same as regular internet certificates, and for the most part are, they in no way, shape, or form affect anything existing today. It has no bearing on your website. It has no bearing on your mail server. It has no bearing on your mobile website or any kind of anything that already exists today. These certificates are used explicitly and only for direct messaging. So at this point, we should be able to identify direct domain names to use. We should be able to identify the TAs inside an organization. We should be able to understand the required DNS settings that need to be made, whether there's changes or you make a new domain then send it to DataMotion. And then ultimately, once all that paperwork has been returned, everything has been submitted, the email that's being sent from DigiCert needs to be opened, accepted for this actual certificate to be generated, and then delivered to DataMotion.